So you can see with this frame that you start to get rust down here where you have either your welds or where liquid likes to build up. So while I have everything stripped, if this is a steel frame, this is at the point where you might want to either heat treat this or put on some kind of coating, clean this whole frame off and coat it so that you don't have this issue with this rust. So let's start getting this put back together. This particular one's kind of a pain because see how the yoke sits inside the frame on this one, and this one has the yoke again inside the frame. This one, the yoke is part of the vise, so that's a little extra added trouble there to try and get this thing on here correctly. But we're going to start putting this together. I'm going to do everything loose at first. I'm not going to tighten anything down. I'm just going to get everything into place here. I don't usually do it for my rear binding post, but for other screws you can put thread locker on the screw once you have everything set up. I'm not doing this now because I still have to make adjustments. But once you have everything adjusted, you can throw a little thread locker on there, and that'll keep things from moving around too, because screws like to come undone with vibration, and that'll also fill up a gap a little bit to keep it from vibrating as much. So it'll keep it from coming out and it'll keep it from vibrating, but we're going to save that to the very end. Okay, so everything's on. Everything's still loose, nothing's tightened down. Now, I'm not going to mess with this binding post, this rear binding post very much, so I'm going to go ahead and tighten this down. So what I did was I just took a needle bar, without the needle, cut it off, and you're going to put that into your rear binding post, and you're going to hold that at an angle to where when you put your clip cord in, it's going to be in the correct position. And so that's going to keep everything from spinning around while I tighten this up. Once we get our springs on here, we're going to be making adjustments, and moving on this machine you can move it back and forth. So that's why it's not tightened down right now, because I still need to make adjustments. Rear spring and a front spring. I'm going to use this one as a color packer, so I have a longer, thinner front spring. And you have a washer and a screw, which screws into the top of the armature bar. And don't screw it down all the way, just get it so it stays on there. Then you slip your rear spring on there, and then your front spring goes over the rear spring. Now the front spring I've taken and I've bent a 15-degree angle on it. So once you have those on there, and you can just put them on finger tight for now, you can take an O-ring and slip it underneath your front spring and then over the screw, or you can slip it over the armature bar and then under the back of the armature bar, just depending on what you want to do. If you've notched the back of your armature bar, you don't want to do this because that defeats the purpose of notching your armature bar. On your rear deck, you usually want a square washer. And for me, I kind of switch off. Sometimes I use a square washer, sometimes I use a coin that I've cut, and other times I use a round washer. I intentionally do that. So for this one, I'm just going to put the round washer on. I'm going to do a round washer and the screw for the rear deck. And then I'm going to put my spring and armature bar assembly on here and just finger tighten that. I can still move everything around, so everything's on there, but I can still make my adjustments. I'm going to take this tube that I have notched and I'm going to run it up my tube vise here until it goes over the armature bar nipple. And that should sit right in there to make sure you have the correct length on your armature bar. Okay, so now your next adjustment is to make sure everything lines up in the middle. Your armature bar nipple should go into the tube, and then your front spring should line up with your contact screw, and if it doesn't, you can add another washer in here to push this over a little bit, or if it's too far this way, you need to put something thinner in there to make sure that your contact screw lines up with your front spring and your armature bar nipple. And then what we're going to look for is our gap and where our armature bar is hitting our coils here. Now, you want to have a small gap on the rear coil. Just enough to where you can fit a dollar bill in there. And you can see on this one, there is way too much of a gap here. It should touch your armature bar should touch the front coil and not the back coil. So what we have to do is put washers and shims in the bottom here until that gets the correct height. Sometimes even you'll add a washer and it'll be too low, and you add another washer, it'll be too high. So what you have to do is come up with something that's the correct width that will go in there to give you the height you want. So my front coil is already correct. So what I'm going to do is remove the screw and remember, before you do this, you can either pack your coils with steel wool, or you can get a longer screw, like I like to do, that will go into there and fill up that empty space that's in your coil cores. So, since I know my front core is ready to be attached, I'm going to go ahead and put some thread lock on here and screw that down into place. And this will prevent the screw from loosening up in the future and keep everything nice and tight. I like to hold the top of the core when I'm tightening these up. because sometimes with these cheap machines you can hold the side and the middle will loosen up and spin around. So I put pressure on top of the core while I tighten this up. And you can do the sides as well. And you can see I took the armature bar off, and the springs, you're going to have to kind of make adjustments as you go here. And check and double check things to make sure everything's correct. I'm hitting level on my armature bar. And at the same time, you want to make sure that your armature bar goes level with your rear deck. That way, if your coils are too far down, your armature bar is going down here, it's not hitting correctly, or if your coils are too tall, your armature bar is going to be at this angle, and that's also incorrect. So you want your armature bar to be level when it touches that front coil.